What happens when a self-made millionaire, dripping in arrogance and champagne, publicly humiliates his pregnant wife at the party of the year. When Marcus Thorne called his wife Clara a mood killer aboard his gleaming super yacht, he thought it was a throwaway comment, a casual display of power. He had no idea he wasn't just insulting his wife. He was igniting a fuse connected to a legacy of power he couldn't possibly comprehend. This isn't just a story of marital strife. It's the story of the ultimate betrayal and an act of revenge so swift, so silent, and so devastating that by the time the sun rose over the harbor, she wouldn't just be leaving him. She'd own the very dock he was parked at. The party was obscene, not merely extravagant, but a full-throated, diamond-encrusted scream of new money. Marcus Thorne specialized in such screams. His 180-foot super yacht, the Triton, was slicing through the placid ink-blue waters of Newport Harbor, its 3 decks blazing with light, a beacon of belligerent wealth. The air, thick with the scent of salt-expensive perfume and grilled lobster, vibrated with a generic bass line that felt less like music and more like a corporate heartbeat. From her seat on a plush white leather banquette near the stern, Clara Ainsworth Thorne watched the performance. At 7 months pregnant, she felt less like the host and more like a piece of decorative and slightly inconvenient scenery. The baby, a boy they had already named Leo, in a rare moment of shared quiet excitement, was pressing firmly against her ribs, a constant living reminder of the future she was trying to believe in. Her husband Marcus was holding court in the center of the main deck. He wasn't a man who simply entered a space. He conquered it. Broad-shouldered with a tan that looked professionally applied and teeth that were aggressively white, he was a monument to his own success. Tonight he wore a linen shirt, unbuttoned 1 button too many, a Patek Philippe watch on his wrist that cost more than the average American home, and an air of utter invincibility. And then I told the board he was braying his voice, carrying easily over the music. If you want to play in the big leagues, you can't be afraid to swing for the fences. Thorne Industries didn't get to a 9-figure valuation by being timid. A chorus of sycophantic laughter erupted from the circle of men around him. They were his usual acolytes, venture capitalists with more money than scruples. Real estate developers who saw skylines as personal Lego sets, and a handful of tech bros who spoke in a dizzying dialect of acronyms and disruption. Their wives and girlfriends, women who seemed to be sculpted from the same template of sharp cheekbones, glossy hair and bored eyes, clustered nearby, sipping champagne and making little effort to engage. Clara ran a hand over the swell of her stomach. She had begged off this party. "Marcus, please," she'd said just yesterday in their cavernous minimalist kitchen that a professional chef used more than she did. "It's going to be a late night. I'm so tired and my ankles are the size of grapefruits." He had simply smiled a tight, dismissive little smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Sweetheart, this is the annual Thorne Industries Summer Gala. It's not a party. It's a strategic event. I need you there. My beautiful pregnant wife from a good family. It shows stability. It shows legacy. It shows a prop she had, thought but didn't say." She had learned early on that contradicting Marcus, especially when he was in visionary mode, was as pointless as arguing with a hurricane. Her family, the Ainsworths of Boston, had a legacy that was measured not in quarterly earnings reports, but in generations. Theirs was a quiet, stoic wealth rooted in shipping and later in prudent, diversified investments. They had townhouses on Beacon Hill, not glass monoliths in Century City. They funded libraries and hospital wings. They didn't name them after themselves. They would have considered the Triton to be in catastrophically bad taste. Marcus had been fascinated by her pedigree when they met. He saw her as the final acquisition, the piece that would legitimize his brutish new money empire. Clara, in turn, had been drawn to his energy, his relentless drive. She'd mistaken his arrogance for confidence, his ambition for passion. Now, 2 years into their marriage, she saw him with a clarity that was both painful and liberating. He hadn't married a partner. He had acquired a blue-chip stock. A sharp, artificial laugh cut through her thoughts. Tiffany Vance, a model-turned-influencer with an Instagram following built on bikini photos and inspirational quotes she clearly hadn't written, slinked up to Marcus. She was wearing a slip of a dress that seemed held together by wishful thinking. "Marcus, darling," she purred, placing a perfectly manicured hand on his arm. "You've outdone yourself. This party is epic. Only the best for my friends." "Tiff." Marcus boomed, wrapping an arm around her waist, pulling her flush against his side. It was a casual, proprietary gesture that made Clara's stomach clench for reasons that had nothing to do with the baby. "Glad you could make it. I wouldn't miss it for the world." Tiffany said, her eyes flicking over to Clara for a brief, dismissive second before returning to Marcus's face. Although she added her voice, dropping to a conspiratorial whisper that was still loud enough for Clara to hear, "The vibe is getting a little sleepy over here." Clara watched, her blood turning to ice. Marcus followed Tiffany's gaze, his eyes landing on his pregnant wife. The warm, performative mask he wore for his guests dropped for a fraction of a second, replaced by a flash of genuine annoyance. He saw her sitting there, a glass of sparkling water in her hand. Instead of champagne, her posture straight to ease the ache in her back, her expression one of quiet endurance. He saw a liability. One of his sycophants, a hedge fund manager named Rick, noticed the exchange. "Hey, Thorne, get your lovely wife over here for a toast." Marcus plastered the smile back on. He gestured grandly towards Clara. "Ah, yes. My Clara." He paused, letting the attention of the group settle on her. She felt like a specimen under a microscope. "She's in that delicate condition, you know." A few people chuckled politely. "Come on, honey," he called out, his voice booming across the deck. "Don't be such a wallflower. We're celebrating." Clara forced a small, tight smile. The thought of heaving herself to her feet and navigating the throng of people made her feel exhausted. "I'm all right here, Marcus. Just resting for a bit." His smile faltered. Tiffany took the opportunity to lean in and whisper something in his ear, her lips brushing his lobe. Whatever she said, it worked. Marcus's face darkened. He straightened up, pulling away from Tiffany, and looked directly at Clara. His voice, when he spoke again, had lost its feigned joviality. It was sharp, cold, and loud, devastatingly loud. "For God's sake, Clara," he said the words, slicing through the party's chatter, causing an immediate spreading silence. "Can you try to look like you're having fun? Just for one night? Or is that too much to ask? You're being a real mood killer." The silence that followed was absolute. The music seemed to fade away. Every eye on that deck, the sycophants, the bored wives, the crew, even. Tiffany, who had a flicker of feigned shock on her face, swung to Clara. A mood killer. He hadn't just said it. He had declared it. He had passed sentence on her in front of their entire world. He had reduced her, his pregnant wife, the mother of his heir, to an inconvenience. a buzzkill, a wet blanket on his glorious, glittering party. A wave of heat washed over Clara's face, a blush so profound it felt like a physical blow. She could feel the pitying stares, the quickly hidden smirks. In that moment, something inside her, something that had been slowly cracking for months, shattered completely. The quiet, accommodating woman who tolerated the excess and forgave the small slights, the woman who believed in the promise of legacy, vanished. In her place, something cold and hard and clear began to form. She met his gaze across the deck. His look wasn't apologetic. It was impatient, demanding. He was waiting for her to do as she was told, to get up, smile, and pretend she hadn't just been publicly filleted. Slowly, deliberately, Clara placed her glass of water on the table beside her. With a grace she didn't know she possessed, she pushed herself to her feet. The murmurings started, people expecting her to either burst into tears or march over and create a scene. She did neither. She held Marcus's gaze for one long, final moment. In her eyes, he wasn't a titan of industry. He was just a small, insecure man in a loud shirt. Without a word, she turned her back on him, on the party, on the entire glittering farce. She walked, head held high, towards the gangway. Each step was measured, silent, and filled with a resolve that felt as ancient and unyielding as the ocean itself. She ignored the frantic whispered calls of her name from a few of the more sympathetic wives. She didn't look back. As she stepped off the Triton and onto the solid, unmoving ground of the Newport Harbor Grand Marina, the cool night air hit her face. She didn't know exactly what she was going to do, but she knew with a certainty that chilled her to the bone that Marcus Thorne's world was about to change, and he wouldn't see it coming until it had already washed him away. The party could keep its mood. She was about to kill so much more. The click of the hotel room door sliding shut was the most satisfying sound Clara had heard all night. It was a solid, definitive sound, a seal against the world she had just left behind. She was in a suite at the Balboa Bay Resort, a place of understated luxury that stood in stark contrast to Marcus's ostentatious yacht. The view from her window was of the very same harbor, and she could see the Triton still lit up like a gaudy Christmas tree, in the distance a monument to the life she had just unilaterally resigned from. She didn't cry. The humiliation had burned away the tears, leaving behind a cute, hard resolve. A mood killer. The words echoed in the silent, opulent room. It wasn't the insult itself that had broken her. It was the public nature of it. It was the casual cruelty, the utter lack of respect for her, for their unborn child, for the very idea of their marriage. It was the final, irrefutable proof that to Marcus she was not a partner, but a possession. And when a possession became inconvenient, it was belittled and discarded. Her phone buzzed on the marble-topped console table. The screen lit up with a photo of them in happier times on a trip to Lake Como, before the sheen had worn off, before she truly understood the man she had married. The caller ID simply read, Marcus. She watched it buzz, the vibrations, a frantic, impotent plea against the polished surface. She let it go to voicemail. It buzzed again immediately, and again. He would be panicking now, but not out of concern for her feelings. He would be panicking about the optics. Wife storms out of his flagship party. It was a crack in the perfect facade of Marcus Thorne, and he would be desperate to plaster over it before anyone noticed. He would be calculating the damage to his brand. Clara walked over to the minibar, not for a drink, but for the sheer normality of the act. She pulled out a bottle of still water, her movements calm and deliberate. As she twisted the cap, Her mind raced not with anger, but with strategy. The Ainsworths were not fighters, not in the loud, brawling way Marcus was. They were strategists. They understood that the most devastating blows are not delivered with a fist, but with a pen, a contract, a quiet, unforeseen maneuver that shifts the very ground beneath an opponent's feet. Her grandfather, Arthur Ainsworth, a man who had quadrupled the family fortune with a series of shrewd, almost invisible investments, had taught her chess as a child. "Never focus on the piece your opponent just moved, Clara," he used to say, his voice a low, gravelly rumble. "Focus on the 3 moves he'll make after that, and be 5 moves ahead of him." Marcus saw the world as a boxing ring. Clara was beginning to see it as a chessboard. She thought back to a conversation she'd had with Marcus a month ago, an argument disguised as a discussion. He wanted to liquidate a portion of the trust her parents had left her to fund a high-risk tech venture. It wasn't a huge amount for him, but the principle of it had horrified her. "It's just sitting there, Clara, dead money," he'd argued, pacing their living room. "I can double it in a year. Triple it." "It's not dead money, Marcus," she had replied calmly. "It's security. It's for our family. For Leo, I am the security," he had boomed, offended. "Thorne. Industries is the security. That little nest egg of yours is a relic from a bygone era. We're builders, we're creators. We don't hide money in dusty old trusts." He had eventually dropped it, annoyed but confident in his own endless ability to generate wealth. But the conversation had been a warning. He saw her inheritance not as hers, but as another untapped resource for his own ambitions. He had no idea of its true scale. Her parents, distrustful of speculative wealth and flashy lifestyles, had structured their estate with labyrinthine complexity. The trust Marcus knew about was merely the tip of the iceberg, a small, visible fraction designed for her upkeep. The bulk of the Ainsworth fortune was locked away in a series of holding companies and legacy portfolios managed by a man as old and steadfast as the wealth itself. Clara picked up her phone. She ignored the string of increasingly frantic texts from Marcus. "Clara, pick up the phone." "This is ridiculous. You're embarrassing me." "Are you okay?" The last one was almost laughable in its belated self-serving concern. She scrolled through her contacts past the superficial names of Marcus's world until she found the one she needed. The entry was simple: Mr. Finch. Alistair Finch had been the Ainsworth family's legal counsel for 40 years. He had drafted her parents' wills and managed her grandfather's estate. He was a man of impeccable discretion and ruthless efficiency, who wore 3-piece suits even in the height of summer and communicated in precise, clipped sentences. He distrusted technology and emotion in equal measure. He had also, in his own quiet way, made his disapproval of Marcus Thorne abundantly clear from the outset. She looked at the clock. It was nearly 1:30 a.m. in California, which meant it was almost 400 a.m. in Boston. It didn't matter. Alistair, she knew, was always awake before the markets opened. She pressed the call button. It rang twice before he answered. "Clara." His voice was exactly as she remembered, dry, calm, and instantly reassuring. There was no surprise, no preamble. "Mr. Finch," she said, her own voice steady, devoid of the tremor she expected. "I apologize for the hour. It is of no consequence. I assume this is not a social call." "No," Clara said, walking to the window and looking down at the marina. The lights on the Triton seemed to mock her. "It is not. I need your help. I require information, and I need to make a significant acquisition immediately. There was a brief pause on the line. She could picture him perfectly sitting in his leather chair in his study on Beacon Hill, a single lamp illuminating a stack of papers, his face impassive. "Define immediately," he said. "I want it done by sunrise," Clara stated. Another pause, this one longer. She heard the faint rustle of paper. He wasn't questioning the feasibility. He was already processing the logistics. This was the world Alistair Finch lived in. The acquisition he asked. Clara took a deep breath. The idea had been a spark born of humiliation and anger as she walked off that yacht. Now, in the quiet of the hotel room, speaking to the one man who could make it happen, it was crystallizing into a concrete plan. A plan so audacious, so perfectly targeted, it made her feel a thrill of cold, exhilarating power. The Newport Harbor Grand Marina. She said, her voice dropping to a near whisper. "The dock my husband's yacht is currently parked at. The land, the slips, the management company. Everything. I want to own it." For the first time in the history of her knowing him, Alistair Finch was silent for a full 5 seconds. She could almost hear the cogs turning in his formidable brain, accessing decades of stored data connections and possibilities. When he finally spoke, his voice held a new note. It wasn't surprise or shock. It was something that sounded for the first time like profound and unadulterated respect. "An interesting choice," he said. "Tell me everything that happened tonight." And so she did. As the party on the Triton began to wind down as the last of the champagne was being poured, Clara Ainsworth Thorne, from a suite overlooking the battlefield, began to assemble her army of one. The sun was still hours from rising, but a new day was already dawning, and it belonged entirely to her. While Marcus Thorne slept the dreamless sleep of the arrogantly secure, a quiet storm was gathering force 3,000 miles away. In Boston, Alistair Finch's study was a whirlwind of silent, purposeful activity. The request was unorthodox, the timeline borderline impossible, but the underlying sentiment was one he understood and privately applauded. He had watched Arthur Ainsworth build an empire on bold, decisive action, and for the first time he saw the grandfather's steel reflected in the granddaughter. "Oceanic Holdings Group." Alistair's voice was crisp and clear over the encrypted line he had instructed Clara to use. He had dismissed her initial apology for the work he was undertaking. "That is the parent company. They are based in San Diego. They own a portfolio of 6 marinas along the California coast, Newport being their crown jewel. On the surface, they appear robust." But Clara prompted. She was sitting at the desk in her hotel suite, a notepad and pen in front of her. She felt strangely alert, the adrenaline of her decision having burned away all fatigue. But Alistair continued. Their CEO, a man named Richard Davies, made a catastrophic error 6 months ago. He leveraged a significant portion of the company's liquid assets to invest in a speculative, deep-sea mining venture. The venture failed. Utterly. The technology was flawed, the environmental reports were disastrous, and the primary investor pulled out last week. Clara listened, her heart beating a steady rhythmic tattoo against her ribs. It was a stroke of luck so perfect it felt like fate. "Davies has been trying to hide the scale of the loss from his board and shareholders," Alistair explained. "He's been seeking a silent partner, a massive private infusion of capital, to plug the hole before the quarterly reports are due in 2 weeks. He is, to put it bluntly, desperate. He needs a quiet, fast, all-cash deal that won't attract regulatory scrutiny. He needs a ghost. And we are in the business of providing ghosts. Clara murmured, a ghost of a smile touching her lips. Precisely, said Alistair. I have already been in contact with him. I woke him up. He was not pleased until I mentioned the numbers. Clara felt a surge of gratitude for this man. He had not questioned her motives, had not cautioned her against rashness. He had simply seen the objective and begun executing the steps to achieve it. What's the price, she asked. Alistair named a figure that was breathtakingly large, a sum that would have been the pinnacle of Marcus's entire career. To Clara, it was a significant but manageable portion of the Ainsworth legacy, a legacy Marcus had dismissed as a dusty old trust. The funds will have to be moved from 3 separate portfolios to be liquid by morning, Alistair said, a statement of fact, not a complaint. The primary one being the Ainsworth Maritime Heritage Fund. Your grandfather would appreciate the irony. Clara did too. Using a fund established from generations of legitimate, honorable shipping wealth to seize control of the very dock where Marcus parked his monument to gaudy excess was a form of poetry so perfect it was almost painful. And Mr. Davies, Clara asked. He's willing to sell the entire holding company just like that, for a premium of 15% above its current distressed valuation, and with the assurance of absolute discretion and my personal guarantee that the funds will be in his escrow account by 9:00 a.m. Eastern Time. Mr. Davies is willing to sell his own grandmother, Alistair stated dryly. The transaction will be for the entire Oceanic Holdings Group. It is cleaner that way. You will not just own the Newport Marina. You will own all 6 of them. Clara's breath hitched. This was bigger than she had imagined. She was not just buying a dock. She was buying an entire coastal empire. It was terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. I have my associates in Boston preparing the preliminary paperwork. Now, Alistair continued, his voice a calming anchor in the swirl of her thoughts. Digital signatures will be required from you. I will guide you through the encryption protocols. The final transfer will be routed through our Zurich affiliate for speed and discretion. By the time the California markets open, the asset will be yours. We will have a new local management team in place at Newport by 7:00 a.m. Pacific Time. I have a man on standby in Irvine, a corporate turnaround specialist named Peterson. He is loyal, and he is formidable. For the next 2 hours, Clara became a student in a masterclass of corporate raiding. Guided by Alistair's calm, precise instructions, she navigated a series of secure portals, inputting cryptographic keys and affixing her digital signature to dozens of documents. The legalese was dense, the numbers staggering, but the purpose was crystal clear. Each click was a hammer blow against the gilded cage she had lived in. She was not tearing her old life down. She was dismantling it piece by piece and using the materials to build a fortress. As the first faint hint of grey began to lighten the eastern sky, the final document was signed. The final transfer was initiated. There was a quiet moment on the line. "It is done," Alistair said. There was a sense of finality in his tone, but also of a new beginning. Oceanic Holdings Group, and by extension the Newport Harbor Grand Marina, is now under the control of a new shell corporation registered in Delaware, of which you are the sole director. Congratulations, Clara. You are in the marina business. Thank you, Alistair, she said the words, feeling inadequate. For everything. Your grandfather was a man of action, Clara. He would be proud, he replied. It was the highest praise Alistair Finch could offer. Now I suggest you get an hour or 2 of sleep. Mr. Peterson will meet you in the lobby of your hotel at 7:30. He will have your new credentials and will escort you. I believe you have an eviction to serve. After the call ended, Clara walked to the window. The sky was now a soft, bruised purple. The lights on the Triton had finally been extinguished. The yacht sat there in the pre-dawn stillness, a sleeping beast oblivious to the fact that the ground beneath it had fundamentally changed. Marcus had called her a mood killer. He had accused her of ruining the vibe of his party. He had no idea. The mood was the least of his worries. By sunrise, she would own his playground. The sheer, beautiful, simple power of it filled her with a strength she never knew she had. She was no longer Clara Ainsworth Thorne, the quiet, accommodating wife. She was Clara Ainsworth, the owner. And it was time to collect the rent. Marcus Thorne woke to the insistent chirping sound of his phone's alarm and a dull, throbbing headache that was the price of last night's victory. He stretched his bare arm, hitting the empty space beside him in the enormous bed. A flicker of annoyance went through him. So Clara hadn't come back. She was really going to drag this out. He sat up, swinging his legs over the side of the bed in their master suite. A room so large and sparsely decorated, it felt more like a modern art gallery than a bedroom. He scrubbed a hand over his face, replaying last night. Okay, so maybe calling her a mood killer in front of everyone wasn't his finest moment. But she had been, sitting there like a damn statue, radiating disapproval. It was his night, a celebration of his success, and she couldn't even bother to play the part. He grabbed his phone from the bedside table. A dozen missed calls from him. A string of his texts, all unread. Stubborn. He'd have to fix this. A simple grand gesture would do the trick. A new Cartier bracelet. Maybe a weekend trip to a spa in Cabo. He'd deliver a non-apology apology. I'm sorry you felt that way, sweetheart. And she'd come around. She always did. She needed him, his world, his protection. Where else would she go? He padded into the bathroom, a cavern of Italian marble, and looked at his reflection in the mirror. He still looked like a king, he thought. A little tired, perhaps, but the power was still there in his jawline, in the intensity of his eyes. Today he had a round of golf scheduled with the CEO of a rival tech firm he was planning to acquire. Business as usual. After a quick shower, he dressed in crisp golf attire, feeling the familiar sense of control return. He sent Clara one more text. "This is childish, Clara. I'm heading to the club. Let me know when you're ready to be an adult and come home." He grabbed his keys and wallet and headed out the silence of the massive house, amplifying his irritation. As he drove his Bentley through the manicured streets of Newport Beach, he decided to swing by the marina first. He'd left his favorite golf shoes on the yacht and wanted to check on the crew. Make sure they were cleaning up his mess properly. He pulled up to the private entrance of the Newport Harbor Grand Marina, a boom gate guarded by a small security kiosk. He rolled down the window, ready to give the usual guard, a friendly older man named George, a familiar wave. But George wasn't there. In his place was a younger, much larger man in a crisp new uniform with a different logo on the breast, a stylized O and H. Marcus held up his owner's access card. The new guard simply held up a hand, his expression impassive. "Good morning, sir. Can I help you?" the guard asked, his voice polite but firm. "Just heading to my boat," Marcus said, gesturing with the card. "The Triton." The guard glanced down at a tablet in his hand. "I'm sorry, sir. This access card has been deactivated." Marcus stared at him. "Deactivated? That's impossible. There must be a mistake. I'm Marcus Thorne." He said his own name like it was a key that could unlock any door. "I have no record of that name for slip 1A, sir." The guard replied, his eyes not leaving the tablet. The vessel Triton is currently docked in a slip belonging to Oceanic Holdings Group. We've had a change in management overnight. Only authorized personnel and registered guests of the new ownership are permitted beyond this point. Marcus felt a surge of hot, indignant anger. A change in management. Since when? And who the hell were Oceanic Holdings? "This is ridiculous," he snapped. "I pay over $200,000 a year for that slip. Get your manager out here, now." "The new general manager is already on his way, sir," the guard said, unfazed by Marcus's tone. A moment later, a black sedan with tinted windows pulled up behind the kiosk. A man in a sharply tailored grey suit stepped out. He was in his 50s, with a severe haircut and cold, intelligent eyes. He looked less like a marina manager and more like someone who forecloses on them. "Mr. Thorne," the man said, his voice as grey as his suit. "My name is Peterson. I am the new acting general manager for this facility. What the hell is going on?" "Peterson," Marcus demanded, getting out of his car. "Why is my card deactivated?" "And who are you?" As the security officer mentioned, Oceanic Holdings Group has undergone an ownership transition, Peterson said, calmly, ignoring the second question. "Effective as of 5:00 a.m. this morning. Under the new ownership's directive, all pre-existing access and service contracts are under immediate review. Your access has been temporarily suspended, pending that review." Suspended review. The words were corporate jargon, but the meaning was clear. He was being locked out of his own playground. "This is a breach of contract," Marcus blustered, his face turning red. "I will sue you, your company, and whoever these new owners are into oblivion." Peterson's expression didn't flicker. "You are welcome to take that up with our legal department. However, I believe the new owner wishes to speak with you personally. She is on her way down now." "She..." The word hung in the air. Marcus's mind raced. Had one of his rivals done this? Bought the marina out from under him as some kind of power play? Was this a corporate attack? It was the only thing that made sense. He heard the soft purr of another car approaching. It wasn't a Bentley or a Ferrari, but a discreet black Audi A8. It pulled up smoothly beside his car, and the back door opened. Marcus Thorne stood there, fists clenched, ready to face his new corporate enemy. He was ready for a fight, ready to unleash his lawyers, ready to crush whoever had dared to challenge him. But the person who stepped out of the car was not a rival CEO. It wasn't a corporate raider he recognized from the Wall Street Journal. It was his wife. Clara was wearing a simple but impeccably tailored, cream-colored pantsuit. Her hair was pulled back in a sleek, elegant chignon. She wore no jewelry except her simple wedding band, which now seemed like an ironic relic. She was not the tired, emotional, pregnant woman from last night. She was calm, composed, and radiating an aura of power that was so foreign on her, it was disorienting. She looked formidable. She walked towards him, her low heels clicking softly on the pavement. Mr. Peterson gave her a slight, respectful nod and took a half-step back, a silent acknowledgement of the chain of command. Marcus stared his mind, struggling to process the scene. His wife, flanked by a man in a power suit, at the gate of the marina he was just locked out of. It didn't compute. "Clara," he said, his voice a mixture of confusion and disbelief. "What is this? What are you doing here? Did you call these people? Are you trying to make some kind of point?" Clara stopped a few feet from him. Her expression was neutral, her eyes clear and direct. There was no anger, no hurt, just a cool, calm assessment. It was a look he'd never seen from her before, and it unnerved him more than any screaming match ever could. "Hello, Marcus," she said, her voice even and steady. "To answer your questions in order, this is a change of ownership. I am here because I have business to attend to. And yes," she paused, letting the words land with surgical precision, "I suppose I am making a point." "What are you talking about?" he demanded, his voice rising. "Change of ownership. What does that have to do with you?" Clara gave a small, almost imperceptible smile. It was a smile of pure, unadulterated power. "Because, Marcus," she said, her voice as calm as the morning sea. "As of 5:00 a.m. this morning, I am the owner." The words hung in the warm morning air, seemingly sucked of all sound. "I am the owner." Marcus Thorne stared at his wife. For a moment, he genuinely thought he had misheard her, that the combination of his hangover and his anger was causing some kind of auditory hallucination. The idea was so preposterous, so utterly outside the realm of possibility he had constructed for his life, that his mind refused to accept it. "You're the what?" he finally managed, a choked, incredulous laugh escaping his lips. "The owner." "Clara, what kind of insane game are you playing? Did you go out and buy a new hat? Is that it? Are you the owner of a new purse?" He looked past her to Peterson, expecting the man in the grey suit to be smirking, to be in on this bizarre, pathetic joke. But Peterson's face was a mask of professional deference, his eyes fixed on Clara. Clara's calm expression didn't waver. She seemed to have anticipated his disbelief, his ridicule. She had prepared for it. "I'm the owner of Oceanic Holdings Group," she stated, her voice retaining its unnerving composure, "which, as you have just discovered, is the parent company of the Newport Harbor Grand Marina. I am the owner of this gate, this pavement, the docks, and the slip your yacht is currently occupying." The sheer factual simplicity of her statement was more powerful than any emotional outburst. Marcus's condescending smile faltered, a flicker of genuine confusion replacing it. "Oceanic Holdings. That's a major commercial real estate firm. That's impossible. Where would you get that kind of money?" He still sounded dismissive, but a note of desperation was creeping into his voice. He was searching for the flaw in her story, the crack in her absurd claim. "That little trust fund your parents left you, Clara, that wouldn't cover the down payment on the coffee shop here." This was the moment. The culmination of years of being underestimated, of being seen as a pretty, well-bred accessory. "The trust you knew about Marcus was what my family referred to as pocket money," she said, her voice turning colder. "You married an Ainsworth. You were so enamored with the name, but you never bothered to understand what it meant. You saw a legacy of good breeding. You should have seen a legacy of actual, substantial, and very discreet wealth, the kind of wealth that buys things, not just leases them." The color drained from Marcus's face. The mention of her family name, spoken with a pride and authority he had never heard from her before, hit him like a physical blow. He was beginning to understand. Not everything, but enough. The ground was shifting beneath his feet. So this is what he sputtered, gesturing wildly. "Revenge. Because I hurt your feelings last night. You're going to buy a multi-million-dollar company because I called you a mood killer." The absurdity of it spoken aloud made him sound unhinged. "Don't flatter yourself, Marcus," Clara said, her voice sharp for the first time. "Last night wasn't the cause. It was the catalyst. It was the moment I realized that you see me and our unborn son as nothing more than parts of your brand. You called me a mood killer. You're right. I am. I'm killing the mood of this delusional little kingdom you've built for yourself. She took a step closer. He could smell the faint, clean scent of her perfume, the same one she always wore, but it smelled different now. It smelled like power. Mr. Peterson, Clara said, not taking her eyes off Marcus. Yes, Miss Ainsworth, the manager replied instantly. Please provide Mr. Thorne with the documents. Peterson stepped forward and handed Marcus a thick, pristine envelope. Marcus took it numbly. His hands, usually so steady, so capable, trembled slightly. He fumbled with the flap, his fingers feeling clumsy and foreign. Inside were 2 sets of documents. The first was a formal notice printed on heavy bond paper with the official letterhead of Oceanic Holdings Group. It was a notice of lease termination. It stated that due to the change in ownership and a subsequent strategic review of assets, the long-term lease for Slip 1A, held by Thorne Industries for the vessel Triton, was being terminated effective immediately. The vessel was required to vacate the premises within 48 hours, after which it would be considered trespassing and subject to impoundment. He read it twice, the dense legal text swimming before his eyes. Vacate, impound, trespassing. These were words that happened to other people. The second set of documents was even worse. They were from a top-tier family law firm. Divorce papers, citing irreconcilable differences. He looked up from the papers, his face a mask of utter devastation. The anger was gone, replaced by a hollow, gut-wrenching shock. This wasn't a power play. This was an annihilation. Clara, he whispered the name, a raw, desperate plea. You can't. Our son. Leo. Leo is the only reason I'm doing this, she said, her voice softening for a moment, but not with weakness, with fierce maternal strength. I will not raise my son in a world where his father believes respect is optional and his mother is a disposable accessory. He will be an Ainsworth. He will learn the value of character, not just the price of things. Just then a flash of color caught Marcus's eye. A canary-yellow sports car had pulled up behind the security kiosk, its engine growling impatiently. The driver's side door opened, and Tiffany Vance emerged, dressed for a day of yachting in tiny white shorts and a bikini top. She had her phone to her ear. Marcus, darling, I'm here. Some new guard won't let me in, she called out, oblivious to the drama unfolding. She sauntered towards them, her high-heeled sandals clacking on the pavement. What's the hold-up? Are we still on for a cruise to Catalina? She stopped short when she saw Clara and the thick envelope in Marcus's hand. Her perfectly glossed smile faltered. Clara glanced at Tiffany, a look of profound indifference on her face, then looked back at Marcus. It was the final devastating blow. She didn't even consider the other woman a threat. She was an irrelevance. Your guest, I believe, Clara said, coolly. Unfortunately, as the Triton will be vacating the premises, your plans may need to change. This marina is now under a new code of conduct. We are aiming for a more family-friendly atmosphere. The subtext was brutally clear. The party was over. Tiffany, a creature whose survival depended on aligning herself with power and money, looked from Marcus's ashen, defeated face to Clara's calm, commanding one. The calculation in her eyes was instant and ruthless. She saw the shift in power as clearly as if it were a stock market ticker. Oh, she said, her voice suddenly flat. You know what I just remembered? I have a casting call. In the city. I have to go. Without another word to Marcus, she turned, walked back to her yellow car, and sped away, leaving a faint smell of exhaust and betrayal in her wake. Marcus watched her go, but it barely registered. His entire world was collapsing in on itself. His wife, his home, his son, his status symbol Yacht, all being stripped away from him in a matter of minutes on a sunny morning in the very place he considered his kingdom. Clara gave him one last look. It wasn't triumphant or smug. It was pitiful. She was looking at a man she no longer recognized, or perhaps a man she was finally seeing for who he truly was. "You have 48 hours, Marcus," she said, her voice now pure business. "I suggest you have your captain make arrangements, Mr. Dussault. Peterson has a list of other marinas in the area, though I can't guarantee they'll have space for a vessel of your size on such short notice." She turned and walked back to her car. Mr. Peterson held the door for her. Before she got in, she paused and looked back at the man she had married. "And Marcus," she added, "for future reference, my hourly rate for mooring is $500. Your 48 hours started 10 minutes ago." Then she was gone, the black Audi pulling away with a quiet, confident hum, leaving Marcus Thorne standing alone in the gateway to a marina he no longer had access to, holding the ruins of his life in his hands. The sun was fully up now, glinting off the water. But for Marcus, everything had just gone dark. 3 weeks later, the Newport Harbor Grand Marina looked different. To the casual observer, the changes were subtle. The uniforms on the staff were sharper. The landscaping was more meticulously maintained, and a quiet sense of order had replaced the slightly lax, club-like atmosphere of before. But to Clara, the difference was seismic. It was the feeling of walking on her own ground, a feeling of security and purpose that was more profound than any she had ever known. She stood on the observation deck of the marina's main office, a cup of decaf coffee in her hand, looking out over the slips. The sun was warm on her face. Leo was kicking gently, a happy rhythmic dance inside her. Slip 1A. The premier spot right at the front was now occupied by a magnificent classic wooden schooner from the 1930s, its brass polished to a high gleam. Its owner was a quiet, elderly philanthropist who was thrilled with the new, more subdued management. The Triton was gone. Clara had heard through the grapevine that Marcus had been forced to move it to a commercial dock down in San Pedro, a gritty industrial port with none of the prestige of Newport. It was the maritime equivalent of being exiled to the wilderness. The public fallout from their separation had been swift and brutal for Marcus. Clara, guided by Alistair Finch, had played it perfectly. There were no messy tabloid interviews, no public accusations. There was only the quiet, undeniable fact she had left him filed for divorce and simultaneously executed a corporate takeover of one of his favorite haunts. The story that rippled through their elite social circles was not one of a scorned wife's revenge, but of a formidable businesswoman shedding an underperforming asset. Clara Ainsworth, the quiet mouse, had been revealed as a lioness. Marcus Thorne, the titan of industry, was suddenly seen as the man who was so foolish, so arrogant, that he had not only lost his trophy wife, but had been utterly outmaneuvered by her. His brand, built on an image of invincible success, was deeply, perhaps irrevocably tarnished. Investors were getting nervous. His board was asking questions. A quiet knock came at her office door. It was Peterson. In the past 3 weeks, he had proven to be exactly the man Alistair had promised, efficient, loyal, and possessed of a dry wit that only emerged when they were reviewing docking fee receipts. "Miss Ainsworth," he said, "you have a visitor. He does not have an appointment, but he insisted." Clara didn't have to ask. Send him in, Mr. Peterson. Thank you. A moment later, Marcus stood in the doorway. He looked diminished. The expensive suit he wore seemed to hang off him. The aggressive tan had faded, and there were dark circles under his eyes. The arrogance that had been his defining feature was gone, replaced by a weary desperation. Clara, he said, his voice quiet. Marcus, she replied, gesturing to one of the chairs opposite her desk. Please. He sat looking around the office at the charts on the wall, the tidy stacks of files. This was his world, a world of commerce and control, but he was now a guest in it. An unwelcome one. I got the latest proposal from your lawyer, he said, fumbling for words. It's very generous. Clara had instructed her legal team to be just that. She wasn't interested in punishing him financially. She didn't need his money. She wanted a clean break. The proposed settlement gave him everything that was clearly his, Thorne Industries, his cars, his properties, and asked for nothing but an equitable child support arrangement for Leo and a final, clean dissolution of their marriage. I believe it's fair, she said simply. He shook his head, a look of genuine, painful confusion on his face. I don't understand any of this, Clara. Why? Why go to all this trouble? He gestured vaguely towards the window, towards the marina, towards her new life. You have all this power. You could have destroyed me, taken half of my company. You could have buried me. Clara leaned forward, her hands folded over her now very prominent baby bump. Marcus, what you still don't understand is that this was never about destroying you. This was about building something for me and for our son. You think power is about destruction, about crushing your rivals, about being the loudest voice in the room. That's not power. That's fear. She stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the shimmering water. My grandfather taught me that true wealth, true power, isn't for showing off. It's for building things that last. It's for security. It's for creating a world where your children are safe and where they can learn values that matter. Integrity, respect, kindness. You called me a mood killer, and in a way you were right. I killed the mood you worked so hard to create, that atmosphere of arrogance and disrespect. I had to, because I can't have my son breathing that air. He stared at her, the final pieces of his delusion falling away. He was finally seeing the woman he married, the woman he had completely and utterly failed to comprehend. He hadn't lost a wife. He had lost an ally, a partner, a force of nature he had been too blind to see. So what now? He asked, his voice barely a whisper. Now, Clara said, turning back to him, her face serene. I am going to run my business. I am going to prepare for the arrival of my son, and I am going to build a life for us here on solid ground. She placed a hand on her stomach. As for you, Marcus, I suggest you find a new place to park. He had no response. He simply nodded, stood up, and walked out of her office, a ghost in the empire he never knew she had. Clara watched him go, feeling not anger, not even pity, but a profound sense of peace. The storm had passed, and on the new horizon the sun was shining brightly. Clara's story is a powerful reminder that the quietest person in the room is often the most underestimated, and that true strength isn't about shouting the loudest, but about making calculated moves that change the entire game. She turned a moment of profound public humiliation into an act of supreme empowerment, securing not just her own future, but the future of her child. on her own terms. It's a testament to the fact that legacy isn't just something you inherit. It's something you build, protect, and sometimes have to fight for. If you were inspired by Clara's incredible journey from a mood killer to an empire builder, please show your support by hitting that like button. Share this story with someone who needs a reminder of their own inner power. And of course, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications for more tales of epic revenge and personal triumph. We'd love to hear from you in the comments below. What would you have done in Clara's shoes? Thanks for listening.